The night before school started, 18 immigrant children stood outside my barbershop in the rain, and the landlord told me cutting their hair for free was illegal. He did not shout. Men like Victor Harlan rarely had to. He stepped out of his black SUV with clean shoes, a dry umbrella, and a folder tucked under one arm, while mothers in work uniforms held children close beneath the weak blue light of the bus stop. It was 8:47 p.m. in Hamilton Heights, Chicago, and the sign on my window still said Last Chair Barbershop, though half the paint had peeled from the L. Inside, the towels were folded. The clippers were oiled. The old brown chair was waiting under the warm yellow light, the way it had waited every August for 25 years. Victor pressed a white notice against my glass. Temporary closure. The paper stuck there like a bandage over a mouth. Behind him, the children went quiet. Some had backpacks with the price tags cut off. Some wore sneakers still damp from walking through puddles. A little Ukrainian girl held her mother's sleeve with both hands. Two brothers from Guatemala shared one umbrella that was too small for either of them. And near the door stood Samir Rahman, 10 years old, hood pulled so low I could barely see his eyes. His mother, Aisha, had come straight from the laundromat on 119th Street. Her hands were red from folding sheets all night. She had called me that morning and asked twice if the haircut was really free. Now she looked at the notice as if it were written in a language meant to shame her. Victor smoothed the paper with 2 fingers. "Mr. Alvarez," he said, polite enough for court, "you are not authorized to operate a public charity after business hours on this property." I looked past him at the children. Every year before the first day of school, they came to me carrying the same fear in different clothes. Fear of being laughed at. Fear of saying their names out loud. Fear of walking into a classroom already feeling behind. Samir stepped closer to the glass. Rain slid down his hood and gathered at his chin. "Mr. Mateo," he asked softly, "do I have to go to school like this? I had obeyed rules my whole life. I had crossed borders, signed forms, paid fees, lowered my voice, and thanked men who never learned my name. But that night, the rule was asking me to send a child into shame. And my hand was already on the lock. I did not open the lock yet. I kept my hand on it and listened to the rain hit the sidewalk, because before a man breaks a rule, he remembers every rule that ever broke him. 29 years earlier, I arrived in Chicago with one suitcase, $62, and a barber comb wrapped in a sock so it would not snap in half. I was 26, too proud to admit I was scared, too tired to pretend I was not. I washed dishes in a diner near Cicero Avenue until my fingers cracked from hot water. I unloaded produce trucks before sunrise. I swept floors in a warehouse where nobody said my name unless they wanted something moved. Back then, English felt like a locked door. People spoke through me, around me, over me. I learned to nod before I understood. I learned to smile when a clerk sighed at my accent. I learned that being new in America meant carrying your dignity carefully, because some people would try to take it before you even knew where to put it. The first person who let me stand still was my wife, Elena. She was working as an aide at a public school, helping children who arrived with missing records, nervous parents, and names teachers mispronounced on the first try. She told me school was where a child either learned to lift his head or started hiding it. Years later, after I rented the narrow storefront on Hamilton Heights and painted Last Chair Barbershop on the glass myself, Elena brought me the first boy. He was 7, from Honduras, with hair falling into his eyes and shoes held together with silver tape. His mother kept asking how much. Elena looked at me once and I understood. I put the boy in the chair. I cut his hair clean. When he saw himself in the mirror, he sat taller. Not happy exactly. Ready. That was the beginning. No grand opening. No newspaper. No camera. Just one child before the first bell. Then 2 the next year. Then 6. Then a line down the block, with parents coming after 12-hour shifts, carrying backpacks, lunchboxes, and quiet hope. I never put my name on the sign. I never wanted applause. I only wanted the children to have one morning before the world measured their clothes, their accents, their addresses, and their parents' tired faces. Victor tapped the glass behind the notice, pulling me back to the rain, to Samir, to the children waiting outside. "You need to send them home," he said. I looked at the old chair under the yellow light. For 25 years, that chair had never been empty on this night. And I knew Victor did not understand what he was asking me to close. Samir did not remove his hood the first time he came to my shop. That was 3 weeks before Victor put the notice on my window. On a hot Tuesday evening when the sidewalk still held the day's heat and the laundromat next door smelled like detergent and wet cotton, Aisha Rahman stepped in first, holding the door open with her hip while carrying a plastic grocery bag in one hand and her son's backpack in the other. She was 34, maybe younger than she looked, with tired eyes and the careful posture of someone who had learned not to take up too much space. "I called this morning," she said. "For my son, Samir." Her voice was soft, but every word had been practiced. Samir stood behind her with his hood pulled tight, even though the shop was warm. I could see only his mouth and the tip of his nose. "Come in," I said. "The chair is not going anywhere." Aisha looked at the price board, then at the cardboard sign taped to the mirror. "Free first-day haircuts for kids." "It is really free?" she asked again. I nodded. She opened her grocery bag and showed me 2 bottles of water and a small box of cookies. "Then please take this. I cannot come with empty hands." I took the bag because refusing would have embarrassed her more than accepting. Samir did not move. I lowered the booster seat onto the chair and turned it toward him. "You can sit with the hood on," I said. "Hair can wait." His eyes lifted for half a second. That was enough. A child who looks away too quickly is usually not being rude. He is protecting the last place he feels safe. Aisha touched his shoulder. "Last year was difficult," she said. "Some boys at school laughed because his hair was uneven. I tried to cut it myself before work." She stopped there, but I understood the rest. A mother with kitchen scissors. A child trying not to cry. A morning that should have been simple becoming something he carried for a year. Samir sat down slowly. His sneakers did not reach the footrest. I fastened the cape and let him keep the hood until he was ready. In the mirror I saw a boy who did not need style. He needed proof that the world had not already decided what he was worth. When he finally lowered the hood, Aisha covered her mouth with one hand. Not because his hair was bad, because she had been blaming herself for it. Picked up the comb. "First day?" I asked. Samir nodded. "5th grade. Then we do not cut for fashion," I said. "We cut for courage." He looked at me, then really looked, and for one quiet second the shop became still. The clippers had not even started, but something in that boy had already begun to sit taller. Victor Harlan first came into my shop 2 days after I cut Samir's hair. The bell above the door gave its tired little ring, and I looked up expecting another father, another boy, another question about the free school haircuts. Instead, I saw a man in a gray coat too clean for our block and shoes that had never waited at a bus stop in the rain. He stood near the entrance without touching anything, his eyes moving across the cracked mirror, the old magazines, the children's drawings Elena had taped beside the register years ago. "Mr. Alvarez," he said, reading my name from an envelope before looking at my face. "I am Victor Harlan. My company recently acquired this building." I dried my hands on a towel and nodded. Men like him did not visit small shops unless paper had already decided something. He smiled, but it did not reach the room. "This corridor is changing," he said. "New investment. New families. Better foot traffic. You understand." I understood more than he wanted me to. I had watched the bakery become a juice bar, the dollar store become a boutique, the old tenants disappear one quiet lease at a time. Victor placed the envelope on my counter. "There are updated property standards. Nothing personal." That was the first lie. Inside were new maintenance fees, new signage rules, new after-hours restrictions, and one paragraph about unauthorized gatherings near storefront entrances. I read it twice. "Children waiting for haircuts are not a gathering," I said. Victor tilted his head like he was correcting a child gently. "Intentions do not change liability." At that moment, Samir was sweeping hair near the back, proud of the clean line I had given him, waiting for his mother to finish a shift. He stopped moving the broom. Victor noticed him, then noticed the cardboard sign on my mirror. "Free first-day haircuts for kids." "That," Victor said, tapping the air toward the sign, "creates exposure for the property." I folded the paper slowly. "It creates a morning where children are not ashamed." His smile thinned. "Sentiment does not pay rent." The shop went quiet enough for me to hear the refrigerator humming under the counter. Samir looked down at his sneakers. I hated that he had heard it. I hated that a boy who had just begun to lift his head had been reminded how quickly men with folders could lower it. Victor picked up his envelope, then set it back down as if doing me a favor. Review the terms. I would hate to see a long-standing tenant create problems for himself. When he left, the bell rang again, softer this time. Samir kept sweeping the same spot, though the floor was already clean. I looked through the glass at Victor's clean shoes crossing the wet sidewalk, and for the first time in 25 Augusts, I understood that the children were not the only ones being measured before school began. Noah came to the shop the next evening while I was adding numbers on the back of Victor's envelope. Rent, maintenance fees, insurance, electricity. The little costs were always the ones that ate first. He knocked once, then came in without waiting, wearing his navy work shirt with Alvarez HVAC stitched over the pocket. At 29, my son had my hands in his mother's eyes, but he carried them like borrowed things. You got the new lease terms, he said, looking at the paper spread across my counter. It was not a question. I was going to call you. You always are. He picked up the envelope, read the first page, and his jaw tightened. Dad, this is serious. I kept wiping the same pair of scissors with a clean cloth. I know. No, you do not. This guy wants you out. And you are giving him a reason. He pointed at the cardboard sign on the mirror. Free first day haircuts for kids. Take that down. The words landed harder than I expected. Those children need this. Noah laughed once, but there was no humor in it. They need housing. They need school supplies. Their parents need better wages. A haircut is not going to save them. It helps them walk in. Walk into what? His voice rose, then stopped itself. He looked toward the window, ashamed of how much he cared. You think I do not remember being one of those kids? I said nothing. Noah stepped closer. First grade. New school. My hair was too long because you were working doubles and Mom did not know how to cut it. My shirt had a stain she could not get out. Some kids laughed before I even sat down. His eyes stayed on the floor. You were not there. The shop seemed to shrink around us. The yellow light. The old chair. The mirror that had watched too many men avoid their own faces. I was working, I said, and hated how small it sounded. I know. You were always working. Then you opened this place and became patient for everybody else's son. He touched the back of the barber chair, not gently, not roughly. Just enough to show me where the wound lived. You kept that chair open for every kid on this block after you forgot how to be my father. I did not defend myself. A father can survive many things, but not the truth spoken by his child in a quiet room. Noah folded Victor's papers and pushed them toward me. Close the program this year. Pay what you owe. Do not lose the only thing Mom left you. Then he walked out before I could say her name. The bell above the door shook once and went still. I looked at the chair, empty under the warm light, and for the first time I wondered whether I had been helping those children or begging the past to forgive me. I went home that night with Victor's envelope under one arm and Noah's words sitting heavier than paper. My apartment was above the shop, 2 small rooms that still carried Elena in quiet places. Her blue mug beside the sink. Her reading glasses in the drawer. A cardigan folded over the chair because I had never found the courage to move it. I set the envelope on the kitchen table and stood there for a long time, listening to the pipes knock in the wall. Noah was right about some things. That was what hurt most. A man can argue with anger. He cannot argue with a memory his son has carried since first grade. I opened the closet where Elena kept school supplies for children who never asked for help out loud. Crayons. Notebooks. Winter gloves bought on clearance. At the back was a cardboard box sealed with yellowing tape. I had avoided it for 5 years because grief has its own locked doors. That night I opened it. On top were Elena's scarves, still faintly smelling of lavender soap. Beneath them was a black composition notebook with a label written in her careful hand. First day kids. I sat down before I opened it. The first page was from 1998. 3 names. Then 5 the next year. Then 11. Beside each name, Elena had written what the child needed but would never say. Afraid to speak English. Mother works nights. Needs shoes. Does not like mirrors. Cries when people laugh at his lunch. I turned the pages slowly, and every year of my shop became something larger than I had understood. Elena had not been sending children to me for haircuts. She had been sending them somewhere safe before the world saw them. Near the middle of the notebook, I found a page folded in half. At the top was my son's name, Noah Alvarez, age 6. First boy we failed. My hand stopped moving. Under it, Elena had written, "He thinks his father was not there. He does not know Mateo worked 16 hours to keep the lights on. He remembers the shame, not the sacrifice." I pressed my thumb against the page until it blurred slightly. There was one more note tucked inside. An envelope addressed to Noah, never sent. "Your father did not forget you. He was ashamed he could not protect you, so he spent his life protecting children in the only way his hands knew how. Called Noah once. He did not answer. Then my phone buzzed. It was Aisha. Mr. Mateo, they put another notice on your door." Aisha was waiting downstairs when I reached the shop, still wearing her laundromat apron beneath a rain jacket. Samir stood beside her with his hood down this time, which told me he had been trying to be brave. On the glass, below Victor's first notice, someone had taped a second paper from the city. "Inspection required before after-hours activity may continue." The words were neat. The timing was not. By 9 that morning, 2 inspectors arrived with clipboards, and Victor came 10 minutes later, pretending the visit had nothing to do with him. He stood near the curb with coffee in one hand and patience on his face. Inside, the inspectors checked the outlets, the exit sign, the fire extinguisher, the back room, the old water heater, the cracked tile near the sink. I answered every question. I showed every license. I opened every drawer. Parents began gathering outside because word had spread that the free haircuts might be canceled. They came quietly, the way working people arrive when they are already expecting bad news. A father from Guatemala held a backpack with cartoon planets on it. A Ukrainian grandmother carried a folded school uniform in a grocery bag. Aisha kept one hand on Samir's shoulder. One inspector asked her if she was organizing the crowd. Aisha blinked, embarrassed. "No, sir. We are just waiting." Victor stepped closer. "This is exactly the concern," he said. "Unmanaged lines, language barriers, children near traffic after dark. I am thinking about safety." Aisha looked at him, then really looked, and something in her tired face sharpened. "No," she said softly. "You are thinking about how we look in front of your building." Nobody moved. Even the inspector stopped writing. Victor's smile held, but only barely. "Ma'am, this is private property." Aisha nodded once. "Our children know that. They learn very early where they are not wanted." I wanted to tell her to stop, not because she was wrong, but because people like Victor punish truth when it came from tired mothers. The inspector handed me a yellow citation before noon. No after-hours operation until review. No public line outside the storefront. No exceptions. I signed my name because my hands knew how to obey before my heart did. That evening, I took down the cardboard sign that Elena had started 25 years ago. Free first-day haircuts for kids. I folded it once and placed it in the trash behind the counter. Samir watched through the window. He did not knock. He just stood there with his school calendar pressed to his chest, as if tomorrow had already become something he had to survive alone. The night before school began, I turned off the lights at Last Chair Barbershop and tried to believe the dark was mercy. The yellow citation lay on the counter. Victor's notices covered the glass. Elena's cardboard sign sat in the trash behind me, folded like something ashamed. Outside, rain softened the street and blurred the blue bus stop light across the sidewalk. I told myself Noah was right. I told myself one haircut could not fight rent, inspections, city forms, and a landlord with clean shoes. Then I heard the first knock. Not loud, not demanding, just 3 small taps against the glass. Samir stood outside with his school calendar in one hand and his hood pulled halfway up, as if he had lost the courage he had worked so hard to find. Beside him stood Aisha, still in her laundromat shoes. Behind them came the others. 18 children. Mothers in scrubs. Fathers in delivery jackets. A grandmother holding a plastic bag of folded shirts. Nobody shouted. Nobody begged. They simply stood there in the rain because for 25 years, this door had opened on this night. Victor arrived at 8:47 p.m. with another man carrying a lockbox and a ring of keys. Noah pulled up behind them in his work van, headlights washing across the children's faces. He stepped out slowly, seeing the line, seeing the wet backpacks, seeing Samir at the front. Victor looked pleased, not cruel, just certain. "Mr. Alvarez," he called through the glass, "do not make this harder than it needs to be." I looked at Noah. He looked back at me, and for once he did not look angry. He looked 6 years old. He looked like the boy Elena wrote about. The boy who remembered shame because his father never explained sacrifice. Samir raised his voice just enough to pass through the door. "Mr. Mateo, do I still get to look normal tomorrow?" The whole sidewalk went quiet. I looked at the old chair under the dim light. I looked at Elena's photograph near the register. Then I reached into the trash, pulled out the cardboard sign, and unfolded it with both hands. The crease stayed down the middle, but the words were still there. I taped it back to the mirror. I unlocked the door. "No, son," I said. "Tomorrow you do not look normal. You look ready." Noah stepped past Victor before I did. He walked inside, picked up the broom, and switched on every light in the shop. Aisha took a notebook from her bag and began writing names. One father stacked towels. A mother poured coffee into paper cups. Victor lifted his phone, but by then the first child was already in my chair, and the clippers were in my hand. By the time the third child climbed into the chair, Victor had stopped smiling. He stood outside with his phone pressed to his ear, watching parents pass towels, pour coffee, and keep the younger children away from the curb. Nothing about it looked dangerous. That was what made him angriest. It looked organized. It looked human. Then a gray sedan pulled up behind Noah's work van, and Mrs. Evelyn Carter stepped out with a raincoat over her shoulders and a folder held tight against her chest. She had been Elena's principal once, back when my wife still walked children through school hallways and taught teachers how to say their names correctly. Beside her was a man in a dark suit, maybe 35, with tired eyes and a calm voice. He looked through the window at me for a long second before he came inside. "Mr. Alvarez," he said, "you probably do not remember me. Daniel Kim, 1998. You cut my hair the week before third grade." He opened the folder on my counter. Inside was an old photograph, faded at the corners. My younger hands rested on the shoulders of a small boy in the chair. Elena stood behind him, smiling like she already knew the future, had entered the room quietly. Daniel placed another document beside the photograph. "Mr. Harlan cannot close this business tonight without proper written hearing notice. He can request review. He can file complaints. But he cannot lock out a tenant while children are inside and a lease dispute is still active." Victor stepped into the doorway. "This is private property." Daniel looked at him. "And this is still due process." The room did not cheer. People like us rarely trust good news until it survives the next hour. But Aisha exhaled. Noah stopped sweeping. Samir turned in the chair with one side of his hair finished and the other still uneven. In the end, I did not win the building. I did not become a hero. Daniel only bought me 90 days. 90 days to answer the citation, fight the lease changes, and decide what last chair could become before men like Victor turned the whole block into something polished and empty. But 90 days was enough for that night. I finished Samir's haircut just before midnight. When I removed the cape, he looked into the mirror and sat up straight. Not proud in a loud way. Just steady. Noah stood beside me holding the broom. Later, when the last child left, he found Elena's notebook open on the counter. He read the page with his name on it. His face changed slowly like a locked door, learning it had always had a key. "You should have told me," he said. I looked at my son, then at the chair, then at the hair scattered across the floor like proof that children had passed through afraid and left lighter. "I thought a father's shame should stay quiet," I said. Noah did not forgive me with a speech. He only picked up the broom again and started sweeping beside me. Before sunrise, Samir walked past the shop on his way to school. His backpack bounced against his shoulders. Aisha walked behind him, carrying nothing but her lunch bag and a tired smile. At the corner, Samir looked back once. Then he lifted his chin and kept going. A haircut cannot erase poverty. It cannot soften every classroom. It cannot make a city kind overnight. But sometimes, before the first bell rings, one child needs one adult to say, "Walk in with your head up." I could not repair every life that came through my door. But that night, I kept the door open long enough for them to begin again.